Welcome back, y'all. I'm Lara Williams, and I am joined today by Richard Palma. This is Sonographers After Dark. Richard, how are you?
Excellent. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm I'm good. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. You and I have met in the past. We kind of reconnected at SDMS, so I was grateful for that. Your career is so inspirational to me. I just have to say that. You've done so much in your career to benefit ultrasound as a profession, and so I just thank you for your dedication to that.
Well, I
But
appreciate that. And, please call me Richie. And yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Anything I can do, I really want to always give back to my profession that's been so good to me. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you joining. Part of kind of prepping for this call, you sent me your CV, and I'm just, like I said, blown away by everything that you've done in your career. And so, I think you have so many things that we could talk about, honestly. One of the things that interests me is really echo education because that's a path that I'm going down personally. I'm developing an echo program. I know you've done that. You've helped people duplicate that. So, just tell me kind of about how your development of your current program that you're at came about, and maybe some insight for people who, like myself, who are looking to start an echo program, and some things that we can look out for.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I can go back to how I started, got into the field as far as education goes. It was whew, way back, I think probably 1998, 99. Kerry Weinberg from NYU, really famous sonographer, educator, good friend of mine, asked if I would take a student of hers. And I was living in Connecticut at the time in Hartford at St. Francis Hospital. And so I said, sure. I mean, I was involved in teaching for a little bit with some of the fellows I had, but didn't really have a student before. So had a student, enjoy teaching, and she reached out to me and was like, oh, she really liked you, she thought you were a great teacher, why don't you start an ultrasound school? And I'm like, huh, that's funny. And she's like, you can do that. I'm like, no, I can't. She's like, I'd be happy to help you. And at that time she had been very much involved in the SDMS and been on the KHAP board at the time and had developed educational programs through KHAP that were accredited. And I was like, okay, but I don't know about paperwork. And so she walked me through the whole process and how to do that. So I ended up pitching it to my school, sorry, my hospital, to have a hospital based program. And they were like, yeah, we have confidence in you. If you could do it, then so I became the program director and clinical coordinator at the Hartford Heart Institute. And that was back in 2001. So we were initially a DMS program for about almost 9 years. And we had done that with a pediatric echo program also. Then my hospital approached me about starting a cardiac cath program, an invasive program. And I was like, interesting. I'm not the one to teach it, but maybe I can find somebody else that can teach it. So at that point, DMS obviously doesn't credential DMS programs, but JRC CVT, cardiovascular technology, does. And we were going to stay in that lane that was cardiovascular. We weren't ever thinking about doing abdomen, OB, breast,
Yeah.
etc. So we switched, actually, we're the first person to kind of move from a DMS to a CVT program. So we ended up having a cath program and then adding a vascular program. So I did
Hmm.
that for, I'm trying to think, almost 20 years. And then I
Oh.
was recruited down by my medical director at the time, Dr. Anita Kelsey. She had gotten a new position as vice chair of imaging at Duke, and
Hmm.
Duke never had an ultrasound program. So they said, you've had success with this hospital-based program. Why don't you come down and develop the program down at Duke? And so it is unique. It's the only program in the world that it's at the School of Medicine level where you have to have a bachelor's already in some kind of healthcare field, or maybe a bachelor's in non-science with anatomy and physiology, et cetera, medical term. And it's still a 1 year hospital-based program.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of where how I developed my school. It's similar to the program I had before, and because we definitely need really good programs out there. We're, as you know, a huge shortage whether it be cardiac or just general ultrasound, et
Across the
cetera,
board. Yeah.
there's huge need, and we're not filling the need. And I think the biggest challenge, and you probably know this, is getting good clinical sites and
Yeah.
good clinical sites. And a lot of people think the clinical site has to be this place where they do the most advanced technologies, or they do the most different types of exams. But literally, it's more about the individuals who want to teach and take on a student and really mentor them and want them to develop. Because as an entry level sonographer, you're not obviously, it's great to learn those advanced technologies, but you really need to develop that great base first
The
and know
foundation.
how to,
Yeah.
the foundation and the anatomy and physiology, understanding physics, application of ultrasound, et cetera. And that is more important than obviously they can go on afterwards. But having a good clinical site, it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest teaching hospitals in the country, but it's helpful if it is. But I think it's really tough with the shortage nowadays, as you know, Lara, that everybody is shorthanded and they're doing more studies per day, and taking on students is a super challenge.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the benefit to having a hospital based program because you've got to have the clinical sites. I mean, that really makes or breaks a program. So I think the hospital based model that you created is really beneficial because you have a built in clinical site. You don't have to go search for clinical sites. You have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's initially way back when I was thinking about this program back in Connecticut. One of the things I did do for a year before I pitched my program, I was a clinical coordinator of a program at a community college. And I noticed that they had classes in the evening, and I think it was 2 nights a week, but they only offered clinical 2 days a week. And
Mm.
then, so I had a few students that for some reason they weren't working or whatever. And they said, can we come 4 days a week? And I found out within 4 or 5 months, which is probably a no-brainer, that the people that spent 4 days in clinical compared to 2 days in clinical
Yeah.
did a lot faster. So when I designed my program, and to briefly talk about the program have and still have, is the first 5 weeks we teach anatomy and physiology and imaging planes, et cetera, and get them ready to obviously go out to the actual clinical setting. We do a lot of clinical observations. They watch open heart surgery, cath lab, et cetera, stress lab, and things. But basically, prepare them. But after that, we have class every Monday, and we do a topic. The first half of the year is all echo, meaning cardiac pathology, and they do 4 days of clinical. So a lot of clinical, obviously. So in one year, a 52-week period, they're getting close to $1,600 of clinical, which is a lot. So versus some people may be in class, and again, there's no perfect recipe. I'm not here to say hostel base is better than a community college or a bachelor's degree. All have many, many merits and pros and cons to that. But I really feel you really have to kind of dive in and scan as much as possible. Scanning each other in class is nice, but you learn their windows pretty quickly. Yeah, you
Yeah.
learn the windows right away. You're like,
You
okay,
repeat it.
yeah, and it's like, okay, and it's so funny because my students have just been out. This is their third week they've been out, and they're like, wow, talk about the different patients' body habituses, and it's very different than their classmates. But then the second half of the year, we concentrate on physics and instrumentation, and then registry prep. And so they take their registry; it's required before they graduate to
Yeah.
graduate. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's an awesome model. I was talking with another sonographer last week about that. That's something that's changed. In the past, I never had to pass my registry before I graduated ultrasound school. That wasn't a requirement, but now it's so competitive that people are coming out of school registered fully, and that is almost the norm now. And that's such a huge shift than what it was previously, a decade, 2 decades ago.
Yeah, well, I remember at the time many years ago when I was looking at the KAP, and KAP is all about having outcomes, right? Your students you bring into the program, are they getting jobs? Are they passing their registry, right? So it's difficult, and I remember talking to other educators throughout the years that sometimes when those students leave your program, you can't tie them down and walk them to their registry and make them pass, but it does affect their outcomes, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I remember mentioning this to at the time I was an item writer for Cardiovascular Credentialing International and
Mhm.
had been involved with ARDMS writing questions also. But at the time, I kind of brought that up and said, if you come from an accredited program, maybe you should allow people to take their registry before they graduate, and that would help educators. They're like, really? Why? And I told them the reason why. And they're like, okay, so they still have to graduate. I said, yes. And they have to prove by giving a diploma and showing their certificate at graduation. So they can take their registry, but they won't earn their credential until they graduate. So they're like, yeah, we can do that. And so I think CCI was first, and ARDMS followed like the following year, and that made a huge difference because then you can have a little bit of that commitment by the student that will pass the registry, and which is great. And obviously, to me, I always tell my students, they're like, "Wow, are we going to be ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, we'll get you ready." But for you, when you start looking for jobs, they're going to ask you like, "When are you going to take your registry?" And my students take it about 2 or 3 months before they graduate. So they already said, "I already passed my exams already." They're like, really? That's
Yeah.
amazing. Like, and so all when do you graduate? Oh, we graduate end of August. Okay. When can you start? September. So I think that big piece is already done already. They're graduating from an accredited program. They've earned their credential. They passed their registry. So I think it's a win-win. And, I've been blessed that I've had 100% placement and
That's
100%
awesome.
pass rate of every student I've had for 25 years. So
Wow. That's incredible numbers because that's not normal. I'm sure, and I'm sure you see the other side of that when you work, with other facilities, that isn't necessarily something that is a common factor across all ultrasound programs. So, unfortunately.
yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that is unlucky is that I'm able to select my own students.
Yeah.
So some schools, obviously, it's first come, first serve. You just register, and to me, the biggest factor isn't, and a lot of people are big about, do you go by GPA? Do you go by this? Do you go by that? To me, is knowledge of the field, knowledge that you know what you're getting into, and because I'm a big person on grit. You have to have grit, right? Grit is defined as perseverance over time. In other words, like,
I love
because
that.
that it takes time to learn this skill. No one's
It does.
born with a transducer in their hand, and a
Nope.
lot of times the frustration that happens when learning is huge, right? You like, okay, I have students after the first 2 or 3 months, and they're so used to being successful and smart, and they're like, I'm terrible at this. I'm like, yes, you are going to
Yeah.
be terrible. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? So, but I think a lot of that is important. So, knowing people what they're getting into, because the last thing would be horrible is to have someone join a program and then halfway through be like, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was. And it's like, really? Because you just took a spot away from somebody who really wanted to do it. So I am very lucky that way. I know some of my friends are like, you're so lucky. We could pick our students. So
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I think that, a lot of other maybe private schools and other institutions also just rely on you. If you sign up and you have the money and you have good grades, then you're in. But yeah, being able to select someone that, has the heart to do it, I think is a really big factor. And, one of the pieces that I think you and I have talked about in the past was that physics piece, right? Because for me, when I was in ultrasound school, we did physics first. And I think that had we not, we probably would have lost a lot of people along the way. So do you see any of that where you're doing physics kind of on the back end? So do you see any kind of drop off from that, or do you kind of push them through?
yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, first of all, I didn't go to ultrasound school. So I didn't mind a graduate at Northeastern and did some graduate work at Harvard, but I learned on the job. So I learned kind of like, I make these analogies a lot when I teach physics, and is that you take your driver's license, for example, when you're 16, 17, or every time you took your driver's license, basic stuff, right? Like steering wheel, gear shift, where's my blinkers, where's my windshield wipers, et cetera, right? Just like basic stuff, right? And so, but you don't know necessarily how that car works.
Yeah.
I call it what's underneath the hood, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, in the first 5 weeks, I teach them basic stuff, the basic concepts about higher frequency, better resolution, lower frequency penetration, et cetera, things about frame rate, because we work in the echo world, right? Temporal resolution is very important. So, but
Absolutely.
they know basic information. So what happens is, to me, burying them with tons of information about physics that really they don't need to. A 16-year-old doesn't need to know where the carburetor is, where this is, where that is, what's a fuel injector. They just don't need to know that, right? So to me,
I don't know if I still know what a fuel injector is. Yeah.
right, right. But the analogy is that obviously
Yeah.
when you think about physics
Physics.
later on, we go into the deepness about how the transducer is built and how we're getting shorter pulse lengths to get a better resolution. And this is why we do that and why we optimize our images, right? How we apply the images, how we get better temporal resolution, et cetera. So I think they enjoy that later because they're like, oh, I saw this like mirror artifact. Okay, yeah, good. We can talk about that now. So where if I brought it up in the beginning, they're like, a
Yeah.
mirror? What is that? Like, I don't know what that is. And so I don't really, so to make them try to memorize and learn all that in the beginning, I just don't think it's applicable to what they need to do in the beginning. So,
I love that approach. I really do. I think that, sometimes people they're forced to learn physics, but they haven't really had their hands on a probe hardly at all. And so how do you correlate that? How do you make that not just memorization, but actual critical thinking and skill set, right? And so I think the way that you're approaching that in your program really bridges that gap. And it's not the way it's been traditionally done. So
but
I like that.
but I also think that it's important that if you think about when are they taking their registry, right? So
Yeah.
if I did all my physics in the first 3 or 4 months, you think they're going to retain that information come 8 months later? No, right? So
Nope.
to me, I'm prepping them as they're going towards a registry that's right fresh in their mind. And then we, like I said, I spend a lot of time, and I do spread out my physics over like 20 weeks or so, where
Mhm.
I could do that, obviously, which I do, of course, now for ESP. I could do it in 12 hours, but that's just way too much and too fast, right?
So
So to me,
yeah, I just want to,
it's
but
like
yeah,
this extra large cheese pizza, and to take little bites
yeah,
each week is easier to digest than just gorging over one weekend. So
right.
so the
Time to be an
idea
elephant,
is
right?
right, and so the registry prep part of it is huge because we kind of go over it again, but then we're going over the physics. So everything is just gearing them towards passing the registry, and they do, like I said, I'm very blessed that they do very, very well on the exams and they all pass and do really well. So I think it's just because that recipe is there. I mean, so again, if I taught zero physics, that would be a challenge, but I do teach basic physics that they
Yeah.
need to know just to kind of get,
Just
yeah.
image quality type of things. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
everything. Just about Doppler, everything about, obviously Doppler, direction, color flow, just some basic stuff, but we'll go deeper into physics and, the fast Fourier transformer later on with color and this, that, and the other thing. But they understand what aliasing is, what a Nyquist limit is, things
Yeah.
like that, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
you said your program is 1 year long, right? A certificate program.
Yep.
So someone who's coming into your program has to have a bachelor's degree. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is in a healthcare field. It can't necessarily be a bachelor's in business or something else.
No, it can, but then you take the
Okay.
additional classes, anatomy of physiology 1 and 2, and medical terminology. So back in Connecticut, we had an associate's degree in allied health, and it could be a bachelor's in a non-science, the same thing with anatomy and physiology and med term, because there's nothing. A lot of people think, these people that have a medical background are the perfect students. No, I've had some incredible students that come from second career. They could be 30 years old, that they were maybe in the business field and marketing, et cetera, like great
Mhm.
personality. They just didn't know that this opportunities was even available, right? So then they
Yeah.
go back, they take the anatomy and physiology because they really have to have an idea of um, a basic anatomy because you've never taken any of that stuff at all. It's huge, right? And so they do really, really well too. And we obviously will teach, as you know, we'll go deeper into the heart and the detail of it. So just that anatomy class alone is not going to teach you everything you need to know, the Wigger scale, et cetera, hemodynamics, right? So much more in depth. But one thing I actually recommend to a lot of people that reach out to me about, hey, what can I do to prep myself to be better in the field, a better candidate? So I actually recommend them to take an EMT course.
That's
And
incredible. Yeah.
I actually did that with both I have two daughters that are in medical field. One's a physician assistant and one's a nurse. And so they did that during college. They took an EMT course because it just taught them more about medicines, how to
Hmm.
assess patients, different disease states, right?
Yeah.
So for people that
My
maybe
son's an
not had,
EMT.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Tighter
yeah. So
EMT, but yeah.
yeah, and I tell them not to do it for, that's going to be the end all be all that you want to be an EMT. No, but the amount of knowledge you have to know to be an
Hmm.
EMT or a paramedic is huge, right? So
Yeah.
recognizing, patients who are diaphoretic, different heart failure states, et cetera, shortness of
Yeah.
breath or whatever, you're like, I've learned a little bit about EKG, right? You learn a little bit about a lot, right? So
Yeah.
that really helps, I think. And so I even tell them, even if you don't get into my program, it doesn't hurt you to learn anything about emergency medicine because if you're
Right.
a, father, mother, whatever, sister, brother, I mean, you can help someone in the future. So I never feel bad about recommending that course to someone because I think it'd be beneficial to anyone.
Yeah. And I think you're right. If someone's coming in without any medical background at all, that at least lays that foundation. So when they get to you and you're teaching echo, you don't have to teach those basic foundations. So I think that's probably a really good starting point for your program.
Well, think about it. If you're a non-science person, you get a little nervous. Have they been around sick people? Have they been in situations where, they think this is, because sometimes they hear that, a friend of theirs does it or they watch it on television. They're like, oh, that looks kind of like fun. I want to do that. Right. But maybe
But
they're
the
not used to
reality,
be, yeah,
yeah,
seeing someone in the ICU who's really sick or this, that, and the other thing. So, even a nursing assistant, course or something to get used to being around patients who are sick. Some people are not
yeah,
used to seeing blood or used to seeing,
right.
because you get called to the ER where someone could be a trauma and you're going to do
Yep.
an echo. You could be a general ultrasound person where they're asking you to do lots of stuff, right? So you're like, whoa, I thought it was just this like
Right.
simple thing, not
Yeah.
like gorge and everything. But yeah, patients can be really difficult if you're not used to it. If you're not a patient care person, I
Right.
can't teach that. It has to be
Yeah.
inside you. Yeah,
Yeah. And, I think sometimes people aren't prepared for what they're going to see. So do you recommend that maybe they shadow someone who does echocardiography for a day or a week or whatever that looks like?
100%. Yeah, you got it. So I mentioned earlier about they have to know what they're getting into. That's
Mhm.
huge, right?
Yeah.
So, and I always joke around because someone will come in and you'll have an excellent resume and everything, and we'll start asking questions. Hey, what do you think the role of a sonographer is? And those, come up with a really great answer. Then I'll ask him like, have you ever seen an echo? They're like, oh no, never. And I'm like, what? So you want to like pay money, dedicate your life for a year to learn this, to do
Right.
something you've never seen before? That seems
You don't
insane
have
to me.
any
Like,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I saw
Yeah.
something online on the internet on YouTube. They were showing an ultrasound or something, and I
Yeah.
thought it'd be kind of fun to do. Yeah, I tell them, I agree, I love it. I can't. It's like I can't tell you how much I am passionate about the field and what I do,
Yeah.
but I can't tell you that's what you're going to love, right?
Of
So
course.
I said you need to check it out in real time. So I always anybody that reached out to me, I had them come shadow Duke, and they will, see what the field is and ask questions and talk to my students because I want them to be 100% committed to want to
Yeah.
do this. And that, like I said, that means more to me than someone who's a 3.9 versus a
Yeah.
2.9. I mean, I don't know. That
Yeah.
I'm not big on. I shouldn't say I should not big on academics. That's not really appropriate. But you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
I
more
mean,
about
academics.
understanding.
Yeah. You have to be able to pass your classes past that physics registry, right? So academics matter, but if it's not your
Yeah.
emphasis when you're accepting someone,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I think it's the whole package, right?
Yeah.
Personality, work ethic, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff is really important to me, to me personally when I look at students. So I like the diversity, I like all that stuff in students. So because I
And you
can't
have to
change
have a
people's
strong, yeah, their personality is ingrained, right? Like you can't change who they are. And I think that part of that, doing ultrasound and echocardiography is one thing, but you also have to deal with the dynamics of the day to day in that. And that means you're dealing with personalities that can sometimes be challenging. Cardiologists, interventional cardiologists, if you're in the general ultrasound, radiologists or interventional vascular surgeons. And so these personalities can sometimes be very strong, and you have to be able to stand up and know what you're talking about, or you will fall very quickly. So you have to have that grit that you were talking about for sure. I think that matters.
Yeah, you have to be confident. You have to have empathy for patients. It's a lot of
Mhm.
things, yeah. And dealing with other people, and a lot of times it's funny when you're interviewing for students. I sometimes look at them too, thinking, okay, I can teach this person, but is this person is someone who wants going to be hired afterwards too? So there's a lot of
Yeah.
professionalism in there too, right? The professionalism, are they able to communicate well because they are communicating with physicians, right? And they have to have critical findings interpreted, and they have to have that
Mhm.
confidence and the ability to communicate. So it's a lot. It's not just putting a probe on a body. So
Right.
it's a very field that's it's an amazing field. We do so much. To be able to look into people's bodies and make diagnoses is just insane.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so much change. And I'm from when you entered the field, and I mean, I entered the field 25 years ago. You entered before that. And so I've seen so much change in this field with equipment and just other aspects of it. And you've seen way more than I have. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like what have the evolutions that you've seen take place in ultrasound systems and just in general in how we teach too.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the industry has responded in many ways as far as it's a nice thing in America that we are very competitive, right? So whether it be different companies, Philips, Acuson, GE, what Hitachi, Canon, not to leave anybody out, but so
Right.
the they all are very competitive to give us the best machines, right? Which is our benefit. So the big thing was obviously the advancement of technology. I started before color, so it was
Yeah.
back in
1984 was when color
yeah,
came out.
exactly. Yeah, I was actually a little later than that, but M mode even, M mode was the first, then it was 2D
Mhm.
imaging and what have you. But you're right; it's just the advancement of harmonics, et cetera. It's great, but I think the big thing for us is ergonomics. So we know
Yeah.
that work-related musculoskeletal disorders is huge, and that's one of the biggest things that impact us. I just came off the board of 4 years with the SDMS board, and we're obviously advocates for obviously all the sonographers that are watching this, whatever, as far as taking care of themselves. And so then a major job of making the machines more
Yeah.
adjustable. So, and I think the emphasis for me and my students, I always teach them ergonomics is huge because if you're hurt, what help are you to your patients if you're not working, right?
Mhm.
So you're
Yeah.
you're no good, right? So basically, we have to make these machines better, right? What's interesting is that you would think with the machines being more versatile, which is awesome. We can, go to places, do more portable. We have laptops now. We even
Right.
have butterflies. We have smaller,
Mhm.
POCUS machines. You have a POCUS right there. There you go.
Yeah.
So there's a butterfly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how we've miniaturized stuff, which is nice.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
technology is there and it gives us better images. But it's interesting is that you would think that the more sophistication we have, probably tests could be a lot shorter. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's kind of gone a little bit the other way. So, because we have advanced technologies, I know in my field, we would do obviously some end mode, some color Doppler, then we add, okay, we're going to do some diastology now. We're adding in tissue Doppler. What's that? Well, it's Doppler, but we're adding tissue in there. Okay, now we can look at the strain. We can look at speckle tracking. What is that all about? Oh, we have
Right.
advanced technologies where you do 3D imaging. So at Duke, we do 3D and strain on every single patient, right?
Yeah.
So my students are used to having a little longer protocol, but it's just interesting how, when you first started, we would do some measurements of the first parasternal view, but we weren't doing a
Mhm.
ton of chamber quantification. Now
No.
it's
Yeah.
left, we did a lot of left heart. Then it seemed like the 2010s exploded where the right heart was the big deal.
Right.
So now we're
Yeah.
doing all right heart measurement. Now we're doing
Hmm.
atrial strain,
Right.
atrial reservoir. I mean, so it's just like,
Mhm.
wow, we're
Yep.
doing even so the technology has advanced, but it's actually opening more doors and making us do a
Hmm.
little bit more work. So that's good and bad, I guess. I
There's a
shouldn't say
trade-off.
bad. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
scanning a little bit longer. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but definitely the machines are just so much better. I make the analogy, my young students don't understand, but like it's like a rotary phone compared to your smartphone. I mean, we
Yeah.
had those machines way
I'm
back
that.
25 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we had harmonics, I mean, some of
Great.
our
Yeah.
best images were some of our worst
Yeah.
that we have
Scanning on
now. So,
VCR and yeah,
oh
fun
yeah,
times.
videotapes, yeah, digital
Yep.
world. So I think it's
Yeah.
come a long way. I think, obviously what you may be leading me to ask is about artificial intelligence. And
Yeah. That was my
obviously
next question.
yeah, so artificial intelligence are in almost all of our machines.
Yeah.
And the good news about that is that it is helping to speed up some of the exam if the artificial intelligence is correctly measuring and doing those things. But it's still up to that individual sonographer to understand, is that measurements that's being done correct, whether it be a measurement of a chamber, whether it be strain imaging, et cetera. You still have to have the know-how of that, but it does speed up certain things. I know like auto strain, auto 3D, little things like that definitely speed up all of the clicking that you have to do and measuring that you do. But you still have to have the knowledge that these are correct information, because AI, like anything, look at Chat GPT, right? You say somewhere Chat GPT, like this must be the
Yeah.
end all be all, and it's like, wow, that is
No,
absolutely incorrect. So
I love Chat GPT for what you can
yeah,
use it for. But you have to be very careful with it because it
oh
makes some
yeah.
interesting mistakes. So yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure.
So yeah, I think the knowledge of that sonographer, not to be afraid of artificial intelligence, because I'm trying to think how many years ago it was. Maybe 7 years ago, ASE came to me and some other sonographers, and we wrote a white paper for the American Society of Echocardiography on artificial intelligence and the impact. And so we wanted to let people know that obviously, don't be afraid. You're not going to lose your job. It, you're still going to be performing
There, yeah,
ultrasounds. Yeah.
yeah,
So, but a lot of that stuff, and even since then, obviously, artificial intelligence has just exploded,
yeah.
not just in our medical field, but in other domains, as you know. So,
Yeah, some of the AI that's out there now is particularly for echocardiography. I think there's a lot for OBGYN and there's a lot for echo and then some other mixed things here and there. But particularly for echo, I've seen some incredible AI companies kind of develop over just the last even 3 to 4 years that have blown me away by looking at what they can do. You put the probe down, you scan, it does strain automatically, it does your EF. But again, you still have to know that these are correct measurements because it can get it wrong, and they're built on normals. So that's the other thing. All of the AI algorithms are all built on an array of normal images. And so if you have something that's abnormal, if your ECG timing is, because it's also going from your R waves. So if your each EKG is not correct, if there's any arrhythmias or anything like that, it's going to throw off your measurements. So
100%.
yeah, so you got to be aware and make sure that you are still in control of the study. So AI doesn't take away your empowerment as a sonographer. It just helps you as a tool for improving your workflow, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will mention that there is one company out there that has really made the next step in artificial intelligence is Ultronics. So
Hmm.
Ultronics has the ability to take a four-chamber view and do all the things you mentioned. But the one thing that it's done, which is absolutely insane, is that they have corresponded that with Mayo Clinic and Patty Pellicker. And basically, they can predict heart failure within 5 years by
That's
looking at
great.
speckles and how they're moving. So it's one thing
Yeah.
to say, okay, did you measure the heart? Okay, great. But can you measure it and actually use artificial intelligence to predict disease?
Outcome.
And
Yeah.
so that is the one thing that's been really eye opening. So if you ever
Hmm.
want to look at that
Yeah.
company, just as far
I'm
as like what
familiar
they
with
do,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, all you do is upload your study, and I think it's like you pay them $6 and they do all the
That's a
analysis
minimum
for you.
fee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and but to have that ability to predict and run that through Mayo Clinic's, some crazy number of patients that they ran
Mhm.
the AI through over the years, and they have something like a 90 something percent accuracy of predicting, which is the next level of not just
Yeah.
measuring, but actually potentially looking at disease states. That's insane.
That I agree completely.
Yeah.
And I don't think we expected that even, 10 years ago. I don't think that we really could predict that that was something that would be something that we're seeing now. And so,
Right.
yeah, so much change in the industry from that point of view.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about some new things you have on your horizon coming up. I know you have some projects you're working on. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was lucky enough a couple years ago when Dr. Edelman retired. He asked me to come help teach his courses. So I've been teaching the physics courses for Dr. Edelman, and those courses have been online due to COVID. And we do feel that it's, I'm sure, like anything, I'm sure some people may want it to be in person. Some people may not embrace the online education, but I know that most of the people I talk to when I'll teach a couple hundred people each month, and I can reach all the people from California to East Coast, Alaska, so they can
Easy
sign
work.
on. Yeah, they can
Yeah.
be in jammies, and the good thing is, at least they don't have to pay the extra money to travel and stay in a
Right.
hotel. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
being in person is good. But so they made that major switch to being online. I think, one of the things, not that COVID was good for anything, but I think we did embrace that we can do things
Yeah.
like this even online. And so it doesn't seem like a far-fetched activity to Zoom somebody and have a meeting and have a collaboration of several people, et cetera, share your slides, et cetera. So it's been going really, really well. But so there has been a need to update his book, which has been um, it's been a while since that's been
Oh,
out. So
wow.
the idea is that a lot of the things with the AIR DMS, et cetera, for the SPI exam, they have changed some of their modules, right? So module 1 and 3 are areas of content. Performance of ultrasound exams 23%, and image optimization 26%. So 49% of the exam is on those two areas, which I love because I've been lucky enough to be involved with both testing agencies, and they do this thing called the DACOM, which is a daily assessment of what you guys do every day. And thank God they finally did one for physics. And like we don't spend all day long thinking about, you know,
Elstery.
the transducer, this or that, but it's more about performance and getting the best images, right? So they changed that, which I think is great because I'm a sonographer teaching sonographers physics. So
Yeah.
I think that's my little plus to that. So I think the new book, which we're writing, is going to come out hopefully late spring of next year. It's pretty much done. We're just editing it now. But the idea is that Bill Schroeder and I wrote it together, and it's really focused on applying ultrasound physics. To me, that's
Yeah.
what you need to do, right? Physics is physics, but you want to apply physics, right? How do we get
Mhm.
better images? How do we understand the images and what the artifacts are, et cetera? So one of the things I did, and I'm lucky enough that I ended up writing a couple of books 5, 6 years ago. I did the pocket reference for Echo, and
Yeah. It's
I think
incredible resource.
we sold, I don't know, 40,000 books. It's insane how much we sold. But the idea when I took that over, and I used that book for like 25 years prior, yeah, I
Mhm.
loved Terry Reynolds' book because it did list it. It gave you kind of the know-how. But what drove me crazy was that there was no images, there was no playing. Like we're a world that we need to see, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up,
Mhm.
in that book, we ended up writing some new chapters, but we ended up putting like 500 videos in it. So it kind of made the book come alive. So then I did the congenital book 3 years ago, and that same thing, videos. So the idea of the physics book is that we're going to have so many videos with this. So instead of just
Nice.
having a book, it's like
Yeah.
here's a picture of this is what maybe reverberation looks like. How about showing videos of it and then having all that, obviously, all of those slide sets will be there for the educators. So they'll be, all the educators will have all those videos and PowerPoints so they can deliver the same information. Because to me, physics is about making it interesting for the student and making it
Mhm.
something that they can always apply it back to what they do every day. because everybody, when you say the word physics, they're like, ew. You're like, but I always say, if you understand physics, like obviously you're an excellent sonographer, the more you know about physics, the better you get better images, the better you treat your patient, the better information, better the physician likes you, right? So, and I always say, I'll challenge anybody that you think is an amazing sonographer, mentor, or something. I can tell you they probably have a good knowledge of how to apply physics every day, how to get the best images. So I always bring it back to imaging, and that keeps it interesting for the students. So, but that's my new project I've been doing as far as that goes. Yeah.
Congratulations on that. That'll be exciting. I think that also brings it around to how students are learning. I think we're dealing with a whole different generation of students, right? Mostly. I mean, I'm sure you have students that are of various ages, but newer students coming into the field, quite frankly, they learn differently than I did. I think that they require a different type of teaching, because they're not going to sit and listen to 3 hours of physics and really be able to retain it all without having a lot of visual aids. And so, putting it down into some micro learning things here and there, that's one thing I've been kind of working on too, is breaking it down into small pieces, and then also giving those visual references, videos, and other tools that really help them retain the information. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we live in this, TikTok slash, 2 or 3 minute stuff, and they want the
Yep.
take homes and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with that. In I love the term death by PowerPoint because it's
Yeah.
it's really interesting, because I'm sure the people that take my class, they're like, wow, he has like 700 slides. Oh, he's going over the next, whatever. But unfortunately, at that level, I have to, right? But
Oh yeah.
in my classroom personally, I learned I had this one woman that I was initially started teaching a couple of years into the field, and I met up with her, and she was out of Hudson Valley, and why am I drawing a blank? Hudson Valley in New York, and Elaine, Eleanor Desnoyer. I probably missed her first name, but definitely Desnoyer. But she gave me a tip. She had just finished her master's in education, and she gave this really cool tip to me. And she said, "Richie, it's not about you." And I'm
Mm.
like, "Huh? What do you mean?" She's like, "You obviously know this information. They know that you know the information. You don't need to show off how smart you are. You have to figure out every class
Mm.
what they know.
Yeah.
So flip classroom. So I can tell you, I almost like hate to ever bring up a PowerPoint. I bring it up maybe just to show, like I just went over mitral regurg. So I have obviously a full talk on that, but I'll show them a couple things. But I go to the board and I
Yeah.
make them go to the board. I ask
Nice.
them questions, and I ask them questions again and again and again. And I keep
Mm.
on asking them questions to see what they know. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things where it's important, because I already know this. I mean, I'm already registered. So I need to know what they know. If I have to go over something again, I will repeat myself 30 times. Or if I have to
Mm.
explain it differently, I will do that. So I'll make someone go to the board and say, draw the Wigger scale right now. Let's go over it again. And if they
Nice.
can't do it, I'm like, well, why can't you do it? Well, let's work it out together, right? So it's, to me, it's not about me. It's about knowing what they know. So to me, I'm all about making them, because sitting on their backsides in class is very boring for them. But them going to the board, them asking questions, being ready to ask a
Interactive.
question,
Yeah.
that to me, that's the way I teach. I know some people find it intimidating to ask a question because you're like being put on the spot. And we ask
Mhm.
people actually during the interview, how do you feel being put on the spot? But that's how I teach, because I want to make
Yeah.
sure that they know what I'm talking about. They're staring
Yeah.
at me with a blank face. How do I know that anything's going in, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
so
If
that's
they can
that's
draw
my
it out, if they can repeat it back to you, then they understand it.
yep.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of teach. So
I love that. I've never
yeah,
heard
different
it
fluff.
put quite that way before, but I like that approach. I like that statement as far as, learning what they know. So thank you for that. That helps me as an educator. So I'm learning from you as we sit here. So thank you.
No, because no, because you're like always try to work on yourself. Right? You're like, I want to be a
Yeah.
better teacher. I want to be more knowledgeable. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess, but it's good to be knowledgeable. But they don't care. Like they want to
Yeah.
know the information. So it's like you get your ego aside and bring it down to the level that everybody can understand. So yeah,
Love it.
so that's how I teach.
Awesome. Well, I have really appreciated this conversation. I think that, your style of teaching, it just inspires me because, I'm looking, we've talked about it. I'm looking to start, and I'm actually in the works. I have things going with approvals with the state of Ohio. So I am working on putting my own echo program together, which will
Awesome.
be a little ways out still, but yeah. So it's coming along. But and I thank you for just kind of helping walk me through some of the things that you've learned along the way. It's invaluable information. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, we
Yeah.
definitely need more schools for sure. And, I also sit on the KAP National Board. So I've been on that for 3 years. I have 3 more years to go. But what's interesting, the reason why I bring this up is that there's been a trend in many fields, not just ultrasound, but there are definitely more, trade schools slash 1 year apprenticeship slash, if you want to call a certificate hospital based program an apprenticeship, but that has grown like almost 60 to 70% more than traditional academics.
Wow.
So yeah, because I think people are realizing that we need to get these people into
In
these
the field.
position in the
Yeah.
field learning. And there's again nothing wrong with colleges or anything. There's no question, but sometimes that may not be the perfect way to learn. Think about nursing, physicians, etc. Right? Physicians do medical school for years, but then they do residency. Right? They
Yeah.
spend years in residency, internal medicine, etc. Right?
Mhm.
Practicing every day 40 hours if not more a week the
Yeah.
position, right? So it's good to have the academics, but I think people, schools and in general are looking at how do we really train these people to do that particular position, right? If you're a plumber, right, you going to class every day is not going to mean, but being in the field,
Right. Doing it
doing it,
actively
yeah,
as well.
yeah, so apprenticeship. So it's just really interesting. We just recently had a board meeting, and it's just like astonishing how many new accredited programs are coming up, and they're
Mm.
all on the job, hospital based slash type stuff. So I
So
feel I
let's talk
point that
about.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to ask real quickly, just because I think, for new sonographers or new students who are looking to get into an ultrasound program, when you poll sonographers, everyone says KHEP accredited, and that's awesome. That's the standard, right? But let's talk about what it takes to become KHEP accredited, because I think that sometimes sonographers may not understand the length of time that it really takes to obtain that KHEP accreditation. And, what can you do? Obviously, the goal is KHEP accreditation, but when you're having to have that introductory period where you still have to have students to prove what you're doing, like let's talk about that and what that looks like, and maybe some things that newer people in the field can look to if there's a program that's not yet KHEP accredited, but it seems like a really good school to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So to become accredited, like you just said, you have to first do a self study. So whether you
Mhm.
decide, so KHAP is the overseer of, I forgot if it's 43 different professions, anywhere from nurse anesthetists to EMTs to ultrasound, et cetera, just all different organizations across the country. But so they're the overseer of all of those, but they have sub areas that the specialty, we call it COAs, Commissions on Accreditation. So for us, meaning ultrasound people, it's either JRC, Joint Review Committee of DMS, Diagnostic Medical Sonography, or CVT, Cardiovascular Technology. So you basically will go to their site and say, okay, I want to apply for accreditation. So they have standards. And I always will say it's important to understand the standards, right? Because you basically can come from different ways. I could be a hospital-based program, a university-based program. You could have a private, like you're doing, a private entity. So that's your sponsorship, right? So you look at all these things. It tells you in detail in the standards what is the program director's credentials, responsibilities, etc. So as a new school, the students don't know this, but they have to make sure all the ducks are in the row, right? So all the things that they do when they do their self-study. So I always recommend, if you're going to a non-accredited program that says they're going to be accredited, I would ask them, have they done a self-study yet?
Yeah.
because they have to do self-study usually a couple of months easily before they could come and do what they call as a site visit. A site visit, they come from that organization and they just basically verify all of the information that you have in your self study. Meaning, you say you have this facility, this classroom, you have X machines. They're going to come and call you, not call you out, but check on it, right? So the thing is, you are correct. You have to have students in clinical before they can do a site visit. So the timing of that is really important, right? So again, you want to get the paperwork going. So let's just say you submit your paperwork in July, your students start in September, but they don't go to clinical until maybe December, right? So be ahead of the schedule. So when they're in clinical, you can do your site visit. So when you have a site visit, they'll speak to the students to verify everything that you're teaching is correct curriculum. And then they'll do all the stuff per standards, and then they will go back and give you all the information about your program and give you like a yay, you should pass, or if there's a citation, maybe there's something you need to change, whatever, you have time to do that. So then that goes to the board every other month for the JRC, DMS, or CBT. They approve your program, and from there, then it goes to KHAP. So that goes to myself and the board members, and they review all of the recommendations from that COA, the Commission on Accreditation. So it can take another 3 or 4 months for that. So it could take, we say, up to a year. So it's very important that you find out, because if it's a 1 year program, you want to know, am I going to graduate from an accredited program? Yes or no? And that could be an impact on your job, unfortunately,
Yeah.
because some
And registry.
institutions, in your
Yeah.
registry too, yeah. But you could have a background with more education with that
Yeah.
1 year of schooling. There'd be a different pathway there. There are pathways for non-accredited schools too,
Mhm.
but I would make sure you ask the people if it's a new program, because that when I said the program at Duke, I had ahead of time, I had everything, all my ducks in the row, and so we were accredited by about 4 or 5 months before they graduated. So at least I
Wow.
knew my first class would be graduating at the time. So, but that's on the school to get all those things done, and it's unfortunate sometimes it does happen they don't graduate, and that could make an impact on those students. But I would, as a person who's looking to get in the field, asking questions like that, I would ask that particular school, where are you in that accreditation process?
Yeah.
If that
Yeah. I
makes
think
sense.
that's Yeah, definitely. That's important information because, you might have a great program that's hospital based in your case, or, and they're doing great things and you have amazing skills that you can gain from that, but they're still working on KHAP, right? So don't count them out necessarily because KHAP isn't quite finalized yet, I think is important. And I don't think that's maybe something that's said enough around just the field of sonography in general. So because it is such a standard, KHEP is the standard. So we do want to be reaching towards that goal. Obviously, that's my goal when I get
Well,
mine going.
I mean, it is a standard, and the thing is, what I like about the standard is that it just is based on outcomes and is based on just doing the right thing. Someone's checking, is these people really in those positions? Is there really that many clinical sites? Because they're trying to protect the students, right? Because a student can
Yeah.
join a program and be like, oh, I thought it was going to be this and that. Then they get there, it's like, oh. And we probably have heard some stories about that. And
Oh yeah.
and it's sad to hear that. And some people paid significant amount of money for programs that were just not on the up and up. And unfortunately, these are nothing related to the individual taking the course, because they could be wonderful people, but unfortunately they may not obtain jobs and things. And it's sad because their heart was into learning and wanting to be good at this. And unfortunately they just made a bad choice of, the selection of that school. So
And probably just because they didn't know any better. I think
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. No
um,
fault of their own. Yeah, no fault
yeah,
of their own. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that insight. I appreciate that. That even helps me moving forward to being the one actually obtaining the accreditation. So, yeah. So I think that is valuable information for anyone wanting to enter the field. And so for you, for your program, you probably have. I think you have a wait list on yours.
No, I've never done
Okay.
I don't do
You
wait
never have
lists.
done one. Okay.
I like we had 97 people apply last year for the 8 spots, so we just haven't reapplied. So
Okay. So
Yeah.
if they want to find your program and enroll in your program, what's the best way to do that?
Just go to KHAP, and I'll just go to Duke University School of Medicine. But KHAP usually, and I recommend that for any school too, right? Because there's a lot of schools, a lot of programs that are identical to mine too. But if you go to the KAP website, if you look under like North Carolina, they're going to
Mhm.
list the 4 or 5 schools. And depending where you guys live, because you guys could be in Texas or whatever,
Right.
you could look up, go to the KAP website, select ultrasound, obviously, or cardiovascular technology or whatever. It's going to list those X amount of schools in that area in the state. And each one of them on the KHAP website will have the link to their website. They'll tell you whether they're in initial accreditation, if they're on continual, all the information will be there, how long they've been accredited, et cetera. So KHAP is a good website to go for anybody. So I always steer people towards that because they're interested in my program. I want them to look at all the programs and
Yeah.
see what program best fits them. I do get a lot of people from California, all these people willing to travel to my school, which is great. But some people may want to stay in their state and see what's
Yeah.
available in their location. But yeah, KHAP 100% is where you should go for all your landing zones for different schools for accreditation wise.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I so appreciate the time that you've spent with me. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for all of your dedication. I love what you bring to ultrasound, echo in general. Always listening to you speak is amazing. And so thank you for your time today. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Yeah. Anything I can do to help out. Yeah. So
Thanks. So this has been another episode of Sonographers After Dark. I'm Lara Williams, and this is Richie Palma. Thanks, Richie, and have a great day. We'll see you next time.